Today we have an exciting message, a challenging message, and it begins with praise. Last week, Michael talked about anticipating this praise, having faith that God is going to bring us through this challenges and these troubles. And today we're continuing with that thread. And today we'll be experiencing this joy of a God who is not finished yet, a God who redeems the unredeemable. And our story begins in Exodus chapter 15, verse 20 to 27, right after they're delivered from the Egyptians and they celebrate and they sing. Then Miriam, the prophetess, the sister of Aaron, took a tambourine in her hand, and all the women went out after her with tambourines and dancing. And Miriam sang to them, "Sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. The horse and his rider he has thrown into the sea." Then Moses made Israel set out from the Red Sea, and they went in the wilderness of Shur. They went 3 days in the wilderness and found no water. From praise, from joy and celebration, to 3 days no water in the desert. When they came to Marah, they could not even drink the water because it was bitter. Therefore it was named Marah, which means bitter water. And the people grumbled against Moses, saying, "What shall we drink?" And he cried to the Lord, and the Lord showed him a log, and he threw it in the water, and the water became sweet, fit to drink. Pepsi or Dr. Pepper, depending on what you like. That the Lord made for them a statute and a rule, and they tested them, saying, "If you will diligently listen to the voice of the Lord your God, and do that which is right in his eyes, and give ear to his commandments, and keep all his statutes, I will put none of the diseases on you that I put on the Egyptians, for I am the Lord your healer." And then they came to Elim, and there were 12 springs of water and 70 palm trees, and they encamped there by the water. God wasn't finished with Israel yet. He had to redeem the unredeemable water. In this story, we get to celebrate with the Israelites twice. We experienced the anticipated praise, which Michael talked about last week. Praise on the banks of the Red Sea. Praise of Miriam and the women dancing. And then we also experience the implicit joy and praise at Elim, with springs of water and palm trees. This is our God, a God who's not finished with us yet, a God who's not finished with Tempe Church yet, a God who's not finished with Tempe or the world. He is still redeeming the unredeemable. But if he can redeem it, it is no longer unredeemable, right? So we say he redeems the seemingly unredeemable, the seemingly unredeemable places, the seemingly unredeemable people, the seemingly unredeemable situations. And one could ask, what situation are you facing in your life? Who is it? What is it? Where is it? What is the challenge that you're facing today so God can redeem it for you? But that would be an incomplete story. In this story, the people of Israel grumble at Moses. Have you been like that? Grumbling at people, looking to another human for your peace of mind, looking to people for your well-being, for life, when we should be looking to God. And who does Moses turn to? Yes, to our Father. So step number one, for God to redeem our situation, we need to turn to him. And of course, when Moses looks at the Father, when he turns to him, when he cries out to the Father, as a father asks for a loaf of bread, God does not give Moses a rock, but God gives him bread. He shows him a log, and Moses picked it up and threw it in the water. Moses listened and obeyed the Lord, and the water was redeemed from bitter to sweet. So step number 2, listen to the Lord and obey. We need to pause here for a second. What kind of person is shown a log and throws it in the water to fix the water? What kind of person? That person must be the kind of person who walks in obedience, who trusts in the Lord. The kind of person who knows the heart of the Father, that He loves us and wants to give us good things. So yes, step number one, we need to call out first, as Moses does when you turn to the Lord. And not simply call out, but call out in faith. But what is faith really? But walking in the way. Obeying, picking up the log and throwing it in, that is faith. And when we walk in the way, it delivers us, just as it's asking us to do in verse 25 and 26. Walk in the way, right? If you will diligently listen to the voice of the Lord your God and do that which is right in His eyes and give ear to His commands and keep all statutes, I will put none other diseases on you that I put on the Egyptians, for I am the Lord your healer. Still seems like a caveat, right? Seems like a caveat there. One that's really difficult to understand. Who can understand the mind of our God, this amazing Father, infinite lover of our lives? In this situation, God appears like an ATM. You do, you obey, and boom, I bless you. And that's unsettling for me, because at one point, my way of understanding God was He's not an ATM. He's not a vending machine where we pile up something and then we get something in return. But there is a way in which God is an ATM. And this is where the challenge begins, in understanding what that means. God's an ATM, but only for those who bank on Him. Only those who say, I have an account with God, and they actually do. Not those who say, I have an account with God, but they actually bank on themselves, or bank on other people, or other things. Jesus says, if you are my friends, you will keep my commandments. How do we show we're Jesus' friends? By keeping His commandments. Not by saying we are, no, by keeping His commandments. We bank on Jesus by our walk. We bank on Jesus by our obedience. We bank on Jesus by the things we post online. We bank on Jesus by the way we walk and talk. And He will take us from Mara to Elim. Many will ask, how can we bank on Jesus? How can we do as He commands so we can see these results that the Israelites see? And that is a tough question, because it is difficult to understand how these desires we have translate into existence through our faith. But I've come to understand banking on God meaning getting to know the heart of the Father who loves us. One who wants to be one with us. And when we are one with Him, we can ask anything and it will be done. Anything you ask. Anything. What is interesting is, as we become one with the Father, the things we seek and ask become different. We move from being focused on the self and we take on God's heart, which looks onto others and their needs. Moses asked for water for those around him. Abraham was a friend of God and he prayed for cities to be spared, for Ishmael, for the healing of Abimelech and his wife. We find Abraham asking not for himself, but for others. When we walk in obedience, the things we want change. I don't know about you, but I believe only people who bank on God would throw a log into water to make it sweet. Those who don't bank on God would cry out to Him and say, God, this water is bitter. And they'll be shown a log and they'll think, you know what, let me try making a filter. I got this. I'm a guy with a filter right here. Logs don't do that. And that's where the challenge is. The challenge to overcome and the challenge to just be spurred on. Earnest prayer of a righteous person has great power and produces wonderful results. A righteous person is one who walks in obedience, a friend of God. Not the obedience filled with fear, because fear has to do with punishment. But perfect love casts out all fear. Love of a friend to another. The obedience born of knowing the heart of the Father and believing. I hope today we comprehend that it is only through the will of God, accepted and acted out in obedience to His commands, that we obtain the power to grasp His will in His promises and to appropriate them in our prayers. It is through fruit bearing that the deeper growth of the branch into the vine can be perfected. and that we attain to that perfect oneness with God in which we ask whatsoever we will. Obedience to God is not a burden, but it is our highest privilege. Banking on Him in word and in action is our highest privilege. It gives access to oneness with Him, in which it is His highest glory, right? Oneness with Him, His all perfect will. In keeping His commandments and bearing fruit according to His will, our spiritual nature will grow to the full stature of the perfect, righteous person, with power to ask and receive whatsoever we will. From Mara to Elim, from bitter water to sweet water. God is not finished with us yet. We have some challenges to face and some calling out to do. And I pray that God reveals Himself to us through Jesus as we believe the reality of His purpose and power to make these wonderful promises the daily experience of all who yield themselves to God and to His words. May we all in coming weeks come and see this Jesus and learn from Him. And may we all grow in the trusting God wants to take us from Mara to Elim. God wants to turn the seemingly redeemable situation we're in right now, personally, in the world, turn it into sweet water. We got to call out, and we have to trust and obey in love, knowing that our Father wants to give us all the good things our hearts desire. May the Lord bless you and keep you, Tempe Church. Amen.